Today, I'm going to show you 3 different business owners who had the biggest paydays of their lives, and yet they all used 3 very different playbooks. One cut most of the team and then sold a company for millions. One fired his MD, his managing director, and he had less work to do, and yet the business made more profit. And one who raised money, lost control, then bought it back and was 50% bigger because of it. I'm going to tell you their stories so you can use their exact strategies to create your own big payday, whether that means selling your business, stepping back, or just taking more money off the table and into your pocket. A few weeks ago, I released Profit to Profit, 7 entrepreneurs who went from 7-figure revenues to 7-figure profit. That was about building a business that prints money. This one is about cashing out, turning the company you've built into the biggest payday of your life. Let's get into it.
His company earlier this year, but if I go back 2 years before that, when the program, he went, Dan, I want to scale this company. Okay, why? I want to remove myself from day-to-day operations. So we did a variety of things, some of the strategies that are in the workbook, Suzanne, and the company grew. It grew and it was very profitable. So it grew from 2 million revenue to upwards of 3 million revenue, and the profit scaled at a greater rate than that. Okay, great. So there was plenty of profit, and he went, okay, I need to get myself out. He and his wife were both working in the business. We hired somebody to do his wife's role. So she retired. She stepped out and retired. Okay, I'm next. I'm like, what do we do? And we hired an MD, and we had a very diligent hiring process, and we got down to the final 2 candidates. The final 2 candidates, Julie, and I said, okay, which candidate did you like? And for me, it was blatantly obvious that candidate number 2 was absolutely the right person for the job. And they went, oh, blatantly obvious, Dan, it couldn't be clearer, it's candidate number 1. I was like, oh, okay, fine. But then we had a debate, and I'm happy to say I won them around to my way of thinking. And I actually, Dan, you persuaded. I said, listen, if you hire your candidate, he's from a big corporate, he's going to grow your revenue, but your profit's not going to grow. And you want to grow your profits. So he's a guy that's been number 2 at another company your size and wants the number 1 job. I think he's the right fit. Other reasons as well. You're the guy who comes from a big corporate, right? CBRE. Yeah. I went, I don't like it. He's a nice guy, but won't work. They went, okay, well, with you, Dan, we'll hire your guys. So they went off the job to my guy, only for him to turn them down. So they're like, oh, shit. I was like, okay, we need to go back to the drawing board and do the recruiting process. They're going, Dan, it's taken us 3 frigging months. We don't want to get more candidates because they got from 20 or 30 down to these 2. And they're going, we don't want to do it again. We're just going to hire the guy that we thought. I was like, okay. How do you think that worked out? Well, fast forward 12 months, the revenue had grown substantially. And the profit had decreased. And interestingly, it had decreased by almost exactly to the penny how much this guy's salary was. Now, on the one hand, it wasn't bad in the sense of the guy had grown the company, and there were more contracts, so there was less density risk, and he was doing his job. So you could go, okay, actually, it's a win. I'm like, you're just paying, I think it was 120 a year, might have been 130. You're paying to buy back your time. And there was still plenty of profit. So the company was profitable, it was bigger. Okay, fine, it's a win. Well, disagreed. So he fired that person, but he didn't want to go through the process again. So we had to come up with a different strategy. And that's why you're here, Andy. It's going to go rather than go, oh, okay, that was the wrong person, hire another one. There are other ways to solve this problem. So what did we do? We took the role and we divided it up, Claire. It's very specifically, people go, we need an MD or we need a COO or something. Well, maybe you do, but you don't actually need a COO. What you want is somebody that you are giving that label to do specific tasks and to get specific outcomes inside the business. So we were really analytical, Ben, into, okay, Alan, what are you spending your time doing? What jobs are doing? What can only you do? What can only you do well? What can we systemize it? Can we automate it? Okay, and we were left with a short list of, I think it was 6 or 7 things from memory, I don't remember exactly, of things that was uniquely was being done by this MD who's now been let go of. And we said, okay, we are now going to split these tasks amongst the management team, because he had a management team of 4, might have been 5 people in place. And what we realized was that most of those tasks, they were very diverse, but this task fitted with this person, with him. This task fitted with her. And it relatively evenly split across the management team. And when we looked at it, we went, you know what, we're going to give this a try. And lo and behold, it worked magically. The company grew again, the profits increased much more, and we didn't have that replacement hire. And these were all existing management teams, so there were no new hires. So there was less risk, not no risk, because you're giving people new responsibilities, but less risk. And I think one of them did get a little bit of a pay bump for the extra responsibilities, but negligible increase in cost inside a management team, which now meant that was freed up. So that delegation to the management team, which kind of speaks to Lisa's point, Jen, earlier of, how do you let go of this? And the answer is slowly, and I might be saying quite painfully. You know, it wasn't easy. But the things that give significant financial rewards often aren't. And so he took it a task at a time and stopped going, we need an MD, we need a sale. They went, okay, what are the things that we need doing and doing well? What are the outcomes that we're after? And when they diagnosed that and they delegated them off and managed the process, over time, over another 12-month period, it bedded in quite well. Now at that point, it was actually gone from full-time to 2 days a week, one day a week, 1 to 2 days a week. So he was significantly out, but he was kind of still overseeing the management team, if you're all with me, Ian. So he was overseeing the management team, but he wasn't day-to-day operational. And I went, what do you want to do? We can take this a step further. And he went, no, I want out. So for personal reasons, I want to be free of the mental burden of thinking about the company. So for him, he said, I want to exit the company. And then I can't be specific at this point of the deal. I'll just say he was very happy. We came up with a valuation for the company, and that was almost exactly what he got. He got the majority of it up front, a little bit deferred, a tiny bit contingent on results, but he was happy with just the upfront bit, hit his number. So he'd had his chat with his equivalent of Greg, and got his financial advisor said, this is your number to be done. This is the capital that we need, and that number was lower than the cash up front he got at completion. Okay, great. So he's got out. He's still working there in a transitional period. Because we're about 6 months close to closing now. He had to do a 12 months. First 6 months a bit more intense, and then it drops down for the next 6 months. Okay, great. So the strategy here was divide and conquer. It's not a new hire. It's what tasks specifically are you doing, Manny? Andy, are you doing that somebody else needs to do, and then going, okay, how can we solve for this problem? When she joined the program, she had 2 businesses, and she's now sold one, and she's now building up the other one. Well, she's built up the other one, and continuing to grow the other one. 2 software companies. But her strategy is quite interesting, because when she came, she was deciding whether to her first company, which had grown to multi-7 figures in revenue, Andy, whether or not she could push it forward because it kind of stalled a little bit in growth. What was the thing to drive it forward? And ultimately, when we analysed it, she said she didn't want to do that. She wanted to focus on the new, smaller business. She decided to exit first. There's 2 parts to this strategy. First of all, she was willing to remove things. So to make it exit ready, she actually cut costs significantly. So it was much more profitable, not just on paper, but in reality. So she cut it back effectively to bare bones, okay? Because it was a recurring revenue stream, so the revenue stayed flat, but the profitability jumped up, which made it more attractive to the trade buys that she was seeking. She's spoken about that here before, and it's on my podcast, so you can look up that if you want to get the specific details of that transaction. But one thing is that, okay, some of you are making life hard work for yourself because you're trying to do too much. James, you need to bin some of it. That crappy bit that's taking up 80% of your time, that's giving you no return or negligible return just because you believe it might turn around. Meanwhile, you've got a great performing product husband or salesperson that is being neglected with a bit more energy that could really blossom. So that exited one company, and of course, what happened to the other company? Magically, it grew. And to be clear, even though she took a multi-seven-figure sum cash off the table, it wasn't because she put loads of capital into company number 2. It didn't need it. The second thing that does extremely well, which is worth paying attention to, is she was really clear about what her must-nots are. Wasn't willing, yeah, that's correct, just checking myself, did not want to hire staff. So for her, she went, I don't want to have to manage staff. So I need to build a business where the guardrails, it's not contingent on those strategies. So there's always a trade-off. So you go, I want leverage of people. She went, no, which meant that she was in the marketing seat seeking marketing strategies, and she spent a lot of time writing articles and doing the marketing herself because she was happy with that trade. That was a sweet spot for her, and she was building a recurring revenue base. So even though she was doing the job of marketing for the company, she was acquiring customers that would pay again and again and again and again. So while one could argue that caused the company to grow more slowly than it otherwise would have done, the margins are of course ginormous, and she really enjoyed the bit that she was doing. So being clear on what your must-nevers are, or what you don't have to fit other people's strategy just because it worked for them doesn't mean it's a fit for you. And I saw her do that in her first company, which she exited, and I'm seeing her doing it beautifully in the second company. She's doing phenomenally well. So rhetorical, Georgina, but you can make a note if you will, is what are your must-nevers, or what are the things which to avoid? Sometimes the things that you keep off your plate are the biggest wins. Sam, just go, yeah, we're not doing that shit. I don't want it. It's not worth the emotional brain damage that I've got to go through to do that just because it worked for XYZ company. And while it may not show up obviously directly financially, it'll pay off emotionally. And I'd argue indirectly, Phil, it'll pay off financially as well. The connection won't be obvious because you won't have all the mental iterations with, in Laura's case, of managing the staff that you don't like doing, or what, insert the blank. For some people, it's not borrowing any money, don't want any debt, don't want it. Yeah, but that'll give you leverage, you could grow, get a better return. Yeah, but I want to sleep at night. Okay, I've got to choose the right strategies for you. By the way, if you haven't figured this out, these strategies are, a strategy is effectively a solution for a blocker. Something that is getting in the way of the business thriving. And was in a relatively capital intense business, gyms, so they had equipment, they had facilities, management, and he figured out 2 solutions. One was he chose a different business model, Mike. Freddie, what he did was he went to a franchise model. So for a while he had multiple sites that he owned himself, and then he started franchising. And then after a bit of time, he realized the franchising bit, I'm really good at selling the franchises and they're doing well. But actually, it's pound for pound, that's way less effort and more reward than running their own sites. For full disclosure, Usman, I've seen other people have the exact opposite experience. They franchise and gone, this is a nightmare, running my own sites is better. Back to the point that I made before, you've got to figure out what's right for you. So that was one part of it. And then the second part, he went, you know what, I could go quicker, but I need more cash. And wouldn't mind me saying, he's got a nice lifestyle. Anybody that saw his Lamborghini when he was here last time, you get a flavour. He's a young chap and he enjoys the fruits of his labour. So he went, okay, I could go much quicker, but I'm going to have to put a lot of capital in. I didn't want to do that. So he chose to raise money. He had an investor that's a billionaire, right, who's well known in the UK finance markets, who put in 7 figures to buy a share of the company to allow it to grow. Okay, now, that allowed the company to grow. Subsequently, that didn't work, and he ended up buying back his shares. Now, it was amicable, fortunately. It was well, Tim, the contract was done very well. There was no litigation was required, fortunately, and it all worked out in the end. But the point I'm making in this room is, for some of you, you're going to go in, if we only had the money. If only we had the money. That's the blocker. That's the strategic block. Usman, then his strategy of raising outside capital can be helpful, which is something else that we're going to touch on over the remainder of our time here today.